Our featured guest tonight is an artist that was behind one of the 90s most quintessential songs. The band's breakaway hit, Breakfast at Tiffany's, was a massive success to the point where you really couldn't go anywhere without hearing it, especially if you were of a certain age. And the members of the band all went on to have fantastic careers inside and outside of the music industry, touring and producing. Here to chat about the history of the band, their song that helped define a decade, and everything else in between is Todd Pipes of Deep Blue Something. Todd, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
So, Todd, where did you guys grow up and what was your home life like? I mean, was there a lot of music in your home?
Yeah, Toby and I grew up mostly in Huntsville, which is north of Houston. All the guys are from different parts of Texas. But yeah, our family was very, very musical. Our parents both got through college on vocal scholarships. So we refer to them as legit singers, like they really know what they're doing. And so in our house, there was music all the time, whether they were listening to it or just singing. My dad would just sing in the kitchen. And they were both fantastic singers. So lots of classical music, a lot of singer-songwriter stuff. Simon and Garfunkel was big in the Pipes house. And then on long car rides, it was just music, just nonstop, you know. And we, for whatever reason, our family, lots of car rides. So there was hours and hours, and John Denver played big on those car rides. John's from Austin. Clay is from south of Dallas, DeSoto, and Kirk is from a little town in East Texas called Kemp.
So what's funny is our family had those long drives as well to go visit usually grandparents or aunts and uncles or cousins. And, you know, at that time we had 8-track. You'd not only be singing along and everybody would be singing, but everyone would also know the exact point in the song when it would go quiet.
When it would yes. Yeah. Do you remember also with 8 tracks, it seemed like whenever you got a new car, an 8-track came with the car. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So our parents always held on because that was such a weird mix of things. Like there's a lot of weird things in my memory from the 8-track that came with the car. And I don't know why, but yeah, we must have worn those things out.
Well, the funny thing is, I think I still to this day know all the silent spots, like in Billy Joel's 52nd Street and The Stranger. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You know, it's funny. And on Rumors, you know, by Fleetwood Mac, it's like, all those little spots, and especially McCartney's first solo album, you know exactly where the silent spots go. So my brother and I are 4 years apart, and frankly, we didn't always get along when we were younger. I'm curious, how well did you and your brother get along, considering you guys started bands like when you were like 4 or 5, like goofy young, right?
Yeah, we started messing around with stuff pretty young. So when you're really young, everything's fine. When you kind of get into grade school, suddenly it seems like, well, 3 years, 4 years seems really far apart.
Yeah.
And then when you're back in high school, it doesn't seem so far apart again. And then it just seems to get smaller and smaller. So yeah, we were goofing around and you know, banging pots and pans and starting all kinds of stuff when we were really young. And then, yeah, when he got into high school and the band I was in had kind of fallen apart, we decided to start something, and we were very experimental and very electronic. So when we started what would become Deep Blue Something, that was a big departure, starting a guitar band.
So obviously the music bug hit you guys really early. What's your first music memory when you look back? I mean, is it a family member playing an instrument, a song on the radio, those family trips, or are you playing something else entirely?
There are two very specific things. One, and you'll remember this, at some point, my mom had left me in the car to run into the bank or to run in to pay the water bill, because they did that back then. You'd roll down the windows, they'd leave the radio on, and I remember hearing Light My Fire on the radio.
The Doors version or the earlier version?
Yeah,
okay.
The Doors, yeah. And hearing it and thinking how familiar it sounded, because it has that, you know, that leitmotif, which is almost Wagnerian in its sound. And I remember thinking, this sounds like something that my parents listened to. And then the verse, and thinking, well, this also sounds, but how are they together? And being so astounded by it and trying to explain it to my mom when she got back to the car. I've heard this amazing song. And I was just transfixed by Light My Fire, which was a fairly new song at the time. You know, I was a very small, like 3, 4 in the back and just sitting in the car. So that amazed me. And then again, listening to music. But what really made me want to get into music was the older kids on the school bus. There were all these rumblings and rumors, this band called Kiss. And they, you know, and then the older kids would say very hushed tones because you know, it was all the parents were afraid of Kiss, you know. And so I knew of them a full year or so before I heard the music, because God knows I couldn't go and ask for one of their records. I remember making that mistake one day in the record store, and my mom turning over to Kiss Alive 2 and looking at that picture and going, never. But I was amazed by that people seemed to be in such awe of this band and thinking, I need to figure out a way that when I grow up, I can join that band. Like I had that in my, because I was in 2nd grade at the time.
I was Ace Frehley for Halloween when I was both 10 and 11, 2 years in a row.
Of course.
With aluminum foil. You'd make the costume with aluminum foil.
Aluminum foil over cardboard. Yeah, we had the whole thing. Yeah. So that was what really made me want to do it, you know. And then I stuck as a fan with them for forever and ever. They've always been kind of, you know, everybody has, a lot of people in the generation before had that, seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Mine, it was Kiss. And then I think they played on this, they made some really random TV appearance. And my mom called them there thinking that if I saw them, I would be turned off by it. And I was just like, amazing.
Do you remember they did a TV show? It was like a movie and they aired it on TV. It was like a 60 or 90 minute. It was horrible, but as a kid, we still thought it was great.
We thought it was great. Yeah. Kiss Meets the Phantom. But even at the time, I remember thinking, I don't think this turned out the way they thought it was going to. Oh, well.
So then, you know, in the lead up to officially forming the band, what kind of music were you listening to? Because you said something about, you know, keyboards or synthesizers. Did you move into the new wave type of thing? Did it become then like Howard Jones and Thomas Dolby or the Big Depeche Mode, or what was it at that point?
It was very much Cabaret Voltaire, Front 242, Nights Arab, very edgy. You know, the Front 242 called it electronic body music. Our friends just thought we were absolutely weird because, you know, the songs don't really go anywhere. They're just these crazy sounds and stuff. But we loved that. And so our first band that we started, that's what we were trying to do. And that's what
you guys were aiming for.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And even when I transferred up to North Texas, our idea was that we would start something that was still electronic in some ways, because the grunge wave hadn't hit yet. There were still plenty of different things around. You know, 808 State played really big in our apartment. I remember, you know, Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, lots of those kinds of bands. And even like EMF, you got to remember how big that hit was too. Mm-hmm. That was a little bit more Manchester-ish, but that's what we were thinking. And it was really only a matter of practicality that we decided it'd be easier to start a guitar band just for playing live purposes. So
that was what you were aiming for. And, you know, the 90s was such an interesting time in music with people experimenting and kind of changing music everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, we had, and by the way, we had EMF on the show, but we also had Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket was just on last week.
I saw part of that. Yeah, I watched part of that just the other day. Yeah.
And that was another band that really gained popularity in college towns. Mm-hmm. What do you think was in the water in the 90s that germinated so many indie bands in college towns? I mean, colleges have always spawned bands in every decade. Like Tom Petty and the Heartbreaker came right, you know, from up the street in Florida is a good example. But to me, the 90s seemed to really kind of ramp that up, no?
Yeah, and here's why I think, because I've thought about that a lot too. If you remember back at that time, it was a really popular thing. You know, what are you doing tonight? I don't know. Let's go out and check out a band, right? Even on Friends, the TV show, you would hear references to this. The movie Singles, that's what they did. That's what you did in the 90s. Because in the 80s, it was very much, you'd go out to a dance club and do that kind of thing. But in the 90s, it had shifted to, let's just go check out a band. And so everybody kind of had their local favorites. And when the local favorites kind of start becoming better than the bands that are touring through there, bands start getting record deals and stuff. And that's what happened in Dallas. I mean, the music scene here between Denton, Dallas, and Fort Worth, there were hundreds of bands. But I think that's what it was. It was just a fashionable, fun thing to do that was different than going to a dance club. And you'd go check out a band.
Now, what was special about the music scene in Denton in those days?
The musicianship. I mean, it's a, the University of North Texas Music School is legendary. The 1 o'clock lab band is amazing. And so there was a competitiveness among the bands of who knows what they're doing and who doesn't know what they're doing, because some bands got up there and it was just endless amounts of solos, a lot of funk stuff and all that kind of thing. And those bands are great. But a lot of times it's musicians playing for other musicians, So in that you would see bands that would be going, okay, well, what are we wanting to do here? Because we can play for other musicians all we want, or we can try to do something. And you would see those bands kind of honing their songwriting a little bit and maybe even not doing solos because, hey, that gets kind of old after the 7th song of, a 15-minute saxophone solo. But it was in the water and your chops better be up, which was really interesting for us switching violently from synths to guitars. We had to learn to play the instrument and now write from that instrument right away. So
in those early days, did you all ever try to just go up on stage with just the synth and a drum kit and that was it? Or did you?
Nah, it wasn't worth it, because when we went out to see other bands, it was one band would play, they'd throw their gear off the stage. The next band would throw theirs up, check, and they'd start playing. You can't do that with synths. It's just, you're linking all these things together. We knew instantly. We didn't even, I don't think we played one show that way. It was, we got to ditch this.